Hello everybody, it's David from ProWarm. We're here today fitting an electric foil under floor heating mat system with our insulation boards. We've chosen this because we're putting it underneath an LVT rigid flooring. We've got our ProTouch Wi-Fi thermostat, we've got our floor sensor, and we've got the bits that come in our kit accessory pack. And with that, let's get cracking. So before we begin our installation, we're just going to check that everything's okay with the mat. I'm going to open the box. In here we'll find our instruction manual and we'll find our warranty document. And the warranty document tells us we need insulation resistance and we need to perform a resistance test on the cable as well. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So let's get testing. Got our foil mat out of the box. So to perform our test, we need to do it on the cold tail. As you can see, on the cold tail, it has a resistance reading of what we should be expecting. That's coming up at 29 ohms. And we've got our tester here. We've got it set onto the continuity function. And we're going to clip onto the live and the neutral. And perform our test, and that's coming up at 29.5, which is well within the tolerance, which is 10%, just so you know. And we're also at this stage going to perform an insulation resistance test as recommended in the instruction manual, and that's coming up clear. And we're going to do the same on the earth braid to the live, and that is also coming up clear, greater than 500 mega ohms. And with that, we know everything is fine in the mat. We're going to record our readings on our warranty form, and then we're going to start putting our boards down and cracking on with the installation. Little tip, if you tuck the board you need to cut underneath your last finished board, you can just mark a straight line across it, and once you cut it on that line, it should fit perfectly in that gap there. Using the offcut, we're going to start the next row. This will ensure that our board joints are staggered, which is just good practice for when you're putting down the boards. So as you can see now, we've got a little bit of an L shape that we need to come past. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim the board to the length that we need. So now we've cut it to the right length. We're just going to use our square or a straight edge to take the reference point to where the wall falls. And that's the section we need to remove. Now we've got a few boards down, we're going to begin taping them together, and that will make sure that everything stays where we've put it. Otherwise as we're sort of walking over it, we're getting on with the install, things can move around, and we don't want that. So we're just going to hold everything secure where it is, that way it can't move, and we'll carry on fitting the rest of the board. So our boards are all fitted, we've taped all the joints, and we're now ready to install our heating mat. So the first thing is positioning. So as you can see, we've got our power supply over there, and our thermostat back box already installed up the wall there. We've worked out where our mat needs to start from. We're going to start from right here. We're going to maintain a 100mm gap from this wall. We're going to roll out that way, and then once we reach the end, we'll do our first cut, flip the mat round, up and down the room until we've used up all of the mat. As you can see, we've marked a couple of dashes at 100mm away from the wall, just so that we can make sure that we keep the spacing that we need. And this dash here marks 100mm away from that wall. So I'm going to roll out to here. So it looks like it's going to fall right about on that loop there. So now it's very important that when you cut the foil to rotate the mat, that you don't accidentally cut the cable. So it's generally a good idea to just hold the cable in your hand whilst you cut the foil. Slow and steady, because you don't want to make a mistake. And now we simply rotate the mat. And you might notice now we've got a small section of cable that is exposed and it's not embedded in the foil. So it's very important that we use the foil tape that's provided in the box with your heating mat. I'm going to be a bit generous with this, because this is what is going to ultimately maintain your bonding to earth across all of the mat runs. I'm just going to cover this over on the top, and we're going to do exactly the same on the bottom, so that that cable is sandwiched in the aluminium foil tape. And now we've done that, we can just carry on unrolling the mat. This little piece of exposed cable. So as you see, we've left quite a bit of a gap between our starting position of the mat and this bifold door. There's going to be a doormat going here, and what we don't want is these cables getting too hot underneath, because it'll burn out. So the excess foil that we originally had over, we've cut into thinner strips. We've worked our way across, and we've focused the bigger strips right in front of the main entrance or walkway into the room. So as you step from the room adjacent, you're not going to step out onto a cold floor. All that's left to do now is just to tape those little pieces of exposed wire and to tape the rest of the mat runs down into the. So the mat's all laid down now. There's one final thing that we need to do to conclude basically the laying process of the mat, and that's we need to recess our cold tail joint into the foam and then run our power lead across to our thermostat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press on the cold tail joint just to make an impression in the foam underneath. I'm going to do the same with the power lead. And now I've got an impression of what I need to remove. So we've now recessed our cold tail joint, we've run the cable up, fished it up to the thermostat position. The next thing we need to do is install our floor sensors. Ordinarily these would sit within a conduit, but because of how the stud work works out, we're not going to be able to get the conduit through the timber. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to fit two sensors, because the idea of having it in the conduit is, should something happen to the first sensor, not that I've ever known that to happen, but if it did, you could pull it up and drop a new one down the conduit without having to damage or lift the floor. So as we can't do that on this particular occasion, we're going to fit two, so that if anything happens to probe number one, we've got probe number two just in case. The first thing to do is to figure out where you're going to put your floor sensor, and it needs to be exactly in between two of the heating elements so that it gets a nice reading of what the ambient floor temperature is. So we're going to start by just cutting a groove. You can see we've got our fish wire up to the thermostat position. So now we're just going to cut a little bit of a channel for the sensor wire. We're going to go through the foil, through the board underneath, and we need to go about 300mm into the heated area, which I would say is about there. Obviously when you're working with a knife this close to your cables, just obviously be careful. So that's going to be sensor number one. We'll obviously cover that with our foil tape afterwards. Just going to remove the excess here, a little bit of debris don't need. So we're now going to do the exact same thing as we did before for the second sensor. I'm going to bring it to our cable rod, we're going to fish it up to the thermostat, and then we'll be ready to do our second round of testing. And we can also test both of our floor sensors to make sure that they've got the correct resistance readings on them as well. And we can record all of that on our warranty form. So we've now managed to get our cables up the wall to the thermostat position. The next thing we need to do is to make sure that we've still got the same reading as we did before we started. So to do that, we're just going to repeat the exact same two tests. We're going to do a continuity test between live and neutral, also known as a resistance test. This should be in the region of 29 ohms as it was when we first started. So let's just get that done now. So we're at 29.6. And then lastly, insulation resistance. So we go onto our earth braid. And 5 to earth, greater than 500 megaohms. So our continuity test is clear, our insulation resistance test is clear. The last thing we need to do is check the resistance of our floor sensors. Now, this particular tester only goes up to 2000 ohms. And the expected reading on this can be anywhere between 8,000 and 20,000 ohms, depending on what the ambient temperature is. So we're going to need to use a different meter. So we've got the ProWarm multimeter here. So this will scale all the way up to 2 million ohms. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it on the 20k setting, because what we're looking for is between the 2k and the 20k mark. Also, these don't carry polarity. It's not like live and neutral, it's just wire 1 and wire 2, so it doesn't matter which way around. And we're coming up at 12.5k ohms, which is normal. And I would expect this one to be somewhere near similar. Yep, so it's hovering around about 12.5k ohms as well. With that, we can record this information on our warranty form, and then we can crack on with the rest of the installation. So this installation, as you see it now, would pretty much be a textbook way of installing under a timber laminate or a floating engineered floor. Now, some manufacturers state that some separation between the heating element and their floor coverings needed, and that's where we would recommend using a low tog underlay such as Quick Therm. But as this particular install is having the rigid plank LVT, which I'm just going to show you now, you can see it's 7.5mm thick. It's extremely tough and rigid, and it already has an inbuilt underlay on the back, so therefore it could just go straight onto the foil mat directly. So that completes our first fix installation. Once the floor's fitted by others, we'll come back, we'll fit the thermostat. If you've got any questions or need any information on any of our products, then please contact us on the information below.